39 years later, by 1881, when she wrote this book, Flatbush was a growing town, a growing village, many more people. Okay? So they asked Gertrude Lefferts Vanderbilt, why don't you add to the history of Reverend Strong's book? Add 39 more years of the history. And that's when she wrote this book in 1881. So and I have markers in here where I'm getting a lot of my information. The third book, I'm going to tell you a story a little bit later that comes from this book. And this wasn't printed that long ago. This was printed in 1945. That's the year I was born. That's 73 years ago. I know how old I am. Okay? It's called Tales of Old Flatbush by John J. Snyder. S-N-Y-D-E-R. Not like Snyder, like the Duke of Flatbush, the center field of the Brooklyn Dodgers. He spelled it S-N-I-D-E-R. And John Snyder was in the 1930s and 40s, a very prominent Flatbush resident. He ran a hardware business. And he knew a lot of the history and did some research. And he wrote Tales of Old Flatbush. And I'm going to tell you a story from this book, which is really interesting. The story will explain why the growing town of Flatbush remained rural for an additional 50 years. It was because of a love affair. True story. Okay, we'll find out what happened.
Ron, where did you get those books?
Many years ago, there's an organization there was an organization called the Prospect Park Environmental Center. They did a lot of walking tours around Brooklyn, and every once in a while they would hire me to do walking tours in some of the neighborhoods. The woman that was in charge of that, her name was, I forgot her first name. Her last name was Irizarry.
So they're all unique. Are they like one of a kind? Are there any?
Here's the price. I paid $20 for this book.
How much?
$20.
$20?
$20. It's right up here. All right. This was, I bought this in the 1980s.
Wow.
In 1980, $20. This one. Is that strip still there? Cool. A little bronze strip going across the path. The plaque on the boulder is telling you what that strip is. To the north of that strip is the city of Brooklyn. To the south of it, the village of Flatbush. Okay? Brooklyn, not all of Kings County. Yes. How did I get interested in this? Starting in the middle to late 1970s. When my wife and I got married in 1969, she was from Brighton Beach. I grew up in Gravesend, and our first apartment was in Flatbush. Okay? In the city in 1834, but only the downtown area. The rest of Kings County was villages, towns, and farmland. Well, you had to pay a toll coming into the village of Flatbush. You don't believe me? There's a toll booth on Flatbush Avenue in 1884. Look at the homes on Flatbush Avenue. Mansions, look at this. There's the toll booth. And there are the trolley tracks, right here, pulled by horses. There was no electricity in 1884. And by the way, when the trolleys passed the Flatbush Dutch Reformed Church on Sunday mornings, they would clang their bell because there was a trolley stop there. The pastor of the church complained to the company and said, please, on Sunday mornings, during services, don't clang the bell. And they stopped clanging the bell on Sunday mornings. Okay? This picture was taken off 1884 on Flatbush Avenue and Fenimore Street, which is about 7 or 8 blocks south of Prospect Park. The original toll booth stood where Flatbush Avenue, Empire Boulevard, and Ocean Avenue all meet. There's a Wendy's in the corner there, Wendy's. All right? That's where it stood originally, because that was the beginning of the town of Flatbush and the beginning of the city of Brooklyn to the north. Okay? They then moved it south to Fenimore Street. In 1884, this was taken. 1894, is when Flatbush and New Utrecht were annexed into the city of Brooklyn. So the city of Brooklyn was growing. Okay? The last toll taker took this on a horse and wagon with a big flat wagon in the back and took it to his house on Tilden Avenue in East Flatbush. In 1924, when the house was being sold, the realtor showing people through the house saw this in the backyard and knew what it was, and he made a deal with the homeowner that that would not be part of the selling of the house, and it was given back to Brooklyn. And if you go to Prospect Park today, you know where the carousel is? Right opposite the carousel, you will see this right there. No sign on it, no photograph. Nobody knows what it was. All right? And there's the photograph. It's used to store, the Parks Department stores some things in there. Okay? I'm going to show this to the Parks Director and see if we can get a picture of this to put on there to let people know exactly what it was. 1826. This is a postcard, an artist view from 1826. Okay? This is the Erasmus Hall, the original building, and you know the building, right? It's inside. Yeah, okay. This is Flatbush Avenue, right here. And you see geese walking around, dog, okay? That's the original building. It was completed in 1787. The first high school in New York State and the second one in the United States. The oldest secondary school in the United States is in the Boston area. That's the oldest. This is the second oldest in the United States. Okay? Now, who was paying to build it? By the way, by 1910, they started to add more to Erasmus. This is on the Bedford Avenue side. And they started, the old building I just showed you is inside, in the courtyard, inside. Okay? Now, before I tell you who donated money for that, let's find out about some of the social things that were going on. Okay. Weddings. How did weddings take place in the 1700s, 16 and 1700s? Early Dutch weddings took place in the home of the bride's parents, not in the church. It wasn't until the late 1700s that wedding ceremonies were held in the church. But the 1600s to most of the 1700s, in the home of the bride's parents. Okay? It was the responsibility of the bridesmaids and the groomsmen to entertain the company. They assisted in serving the supper, carving the food, cutting and serving the cake as well. And the day after the wedding, the bridal party went to the home of the groom's parents, where the bride was welcomed into his family. There the party continued. But there was no honeymoon. Where were they going to go? There were no Catskill Mountains. There were mountains, but there were no hotels. There were no railroads yet. This was the 16 and 1700s. Atlantic City wasn't there yet. Miami Beach, forget about it. Only had horse and wagons. They stayed on the farm. Okay? No honeymoon. All right? Transportation was just horses and wagons. Funerals. Death of a Flatbush resident in 1789. What was served at the funeral? 20 gallons of good wine, 2 gallons of spirits, a half dozen nutmegs, 1 large loaf of sugar, a half gross of long pipes, 4 pounds of tobacco, 1½ dozen black silk handkerchiefs, and 6 loaves of bread. The service was held in the home of the deceased, not in the church. Not yet, anyhow. The church sexton went from house to house, inviting the residents of Flatbush to the funeral. There was no undertaker. The cabinet maker prepared the coffin. He would come to the home of the deceased and measure him. then build the coffin. Okay? Often when people reached middle age, shrouds were already made for them, just in case. There was a superstitious custom that was used for generations to cover the looking glasses in the homes, the mirrors. That still goes on today in a lot of the Jewish homes, covering the glass to keep the image of the person intact. Okay? The memory of the person that lived there. Okay. Now, the Flatbush Town Hall that I showed you the picture of, built in 1875 on Grant Street, which is now Snyder Avenue. The Flatbush Board of Improvement included the following people: Judge John A. Lott, Judge John J. Vanderbilt, Philip S. Crook, I'll mention him again later, Jacob Martens, I mentioned earlier Joris Martens, the guy who invited the British into his home. This is 1832. Flatbush was the county seat. The county courthouse was on Flatbush Avenue at Snyder Avenue. Snyder Avenue ends right at Flatbush Avenue. And across the street was the Kings County Courthouse, one jail cell. Okay? The original county seat was in Gravesend, all the way down near the Atlantic Ocean. Right? There we are. Okay? But as Flatbush grew, and more people buying homes there, and farmland and everything, a lot of prominent residents, they needed the county seat, the courthouse, to be in a central location where the population was growing. So they moved the county seat, the courthouse, from Gravesend to Flatbush. Well, in 1832, a young man named Richard Fenton arrived here from the country called Wales, W-A-L-E-S. Wales is attached, it's part of the United Kingdom. Okay? He had a very heavy Welsh accent. He landed in Manhattan, and he's looking for work. Couldn't find any work. He saw a ferry, it said Fulton Ferry. Didn't know anything about it, gets on the ferry, it takes him across to the Kings County side, to the Brooklyn side. And he went from place to place to place looking for work. Couldn't find any work. Then he saw a big stagecoach, and on the top it said Flatbush. He had no idea what that was. He didn't have much money left. Paid his fare, got on the stagecoach, and it goes straight, then goes over the hills. 40 years later, that would become Prospect Park. This was 1832. Okay? By 1870, Prospect Park was established. And he gets off at the end of the rolling hills, where today's intersection of Flatbush Avenue, Ocean Avenue, and Empire Boulevard. And that was the entrance into the village of Flatbush. And he started going from farm to farm to farm, looking for work. And finally, he got a job. And most of the workers on the farm have been there for a while. They know how to do everything. And Mr. Fenton, a young man, you know, he had a heavy Welsh accent. And this one fellow in particular was kind of goofing on him, making fun of him. And finally, by the third day, this fellow goes over to Richard Fenton, goes over, he starts mocking him, and slaps him across the face. And Richard Fenton just pushes the guy right back. Well, the guy stumbled backwards, fell, and hit his head on a rock. And he was killed. He was killed. Now, Fenton didn't mean to kill the guy. He just pushed him back, and the guy stumbled. Well, the other workers who were friends with this gentleman, they didn't tell the true story of what happened. And Richard Fenton was put in the one jail cell in the Kings County, in the Flatbush courthouse. Well, they had to wait several days, 4 or 5 days, for the circuit judge to make a circuit around Kings County to come to Flatbush for the trial. Well, in the meantime, the lovely Ophelia, she was the jailer's daughter, and it was her job to take food to whoever happens to be in the jail. And this was in the summer of 1832. It was a hot summer. It was a bit of a drought. Farmers were having a problem getting water. And finally, after about the 4th or 5th day, The judge was due in about 2 days. And they kind of got to know each other quite well. And he was pleading. He said, I didn't mean it. You know, the guy, he slapped me, I pushed him, he fell, hit him. I didn't mean to kill him. Well, the witnesses were not going to vouch for Richard Fenton. He was going to be found guilty. Well, Ophelia and Richard fell in love. And they thought up a scheme. Ophelia was going to set a fire at the rear of the courthouse, which was made of wood, except for the bars and the jail cell. And while the fire engine, pulled by a horse, okay, and had a pumper, the hose would go to a nearby pond, and they would suction the water out to put the fire out. But the water level was so low that the hose got clogged with mud, and they couldn't put the fire out. So while the firemen were trying to put the fire out outside at the rear, Ophelia went inside, unlocked the jail cell, and Richard and Ophelia ran away and eloped.
Wow.
And the courthouse burned down.
Where'd they go?
The only one that knew about this was Gertrude Lefferts Vanderbilt, who wrote the book in 1881. Okay? And John J. Snyder rewrote the story in his book in 1945. So, no Kings County Courthouse. Well, by 1832, most of the population of Kings County at that time was where the town of Brooklyn was. Brooklyn Heights, downtown Brooklyn, okay? So, 2 years later, 1834, Brooklyn became a city, just the downtown Brooklyn Heights area, okay? It became the city of Brooklyn. Well, they decided that's where the new courthouse was going to be built, because it was the closest city to New York City across the river in Manhattan, okay? Well, it took almost 30 years until 1860 that the new courthouse was built. Today, where that courthouse was built, today, the courthouse was torn down in the 1940s. And today it is the home of the Brooklyn Law School on Geralman Street, diagonally across the street from Borough Hall. Okay? Well, now, what about people who gave money to build Erasmus High School, the original building? Okay? This is a page. This is a page out of Reverend Strong's book in 1842 and reprinted by Gertrude in 1881. So I made a Xerox copy of the page. And in it tells the history of Erasmus. Okay? These are the people, and you're going to recognize their names. And all of them did not live in Flatbush. Okay? But they realized how important it was to have a school of higher learning, a high school. For boys, this was for boys. John Vanderbilt. Peter, by the way, the money they donated is in pounds. So John Vanderbilt donated 100 pounds. I'm not sure what that would be equivalent today. All right? I'm not going to give you the amount that everyone gave. John Vanderbilt. Peter Lefferts. Vanderbilt Avenue, Lefferts Avenue. Garrett Martens, Martens Street. M. Clarkson, Matthew Clarkson. Okay, Clarkson Avenue. Joris Martens. He's the one that welcomed the British into the house. Jacob Lefferts. Johannes E. Lott. Okay? There's, by the way, you'll pardon the pun, there were a lot of Lotts in Brooklyn. Judge John Lott, Johannes E. Lott, Cornelius Vanderveer. Vanderveer Street is right off Flatbush Avenue near Bertelion Road. Okay? James Duane, Duane Reed Pharmacy in Lower Manhattan. Duane Street and Reed Street intersect. That was the first Duane Reed Pharmacy right there. So you learn a little history there. All right? Richard Varick, Varick Street in Lower Manhattan. Rockhouse Livingston. Alexander Hamilton. The Alexander Hamilton. Will you hear the last name later? Edward Livingston. You'll recognize this name. Adriante Voorhees. Voorhees Avenue, okay? Hendrik Sydam, S-U-Y-D-A-M. There is a Sydam Street in Brooklyn. I think it's in Williams, it might be Williamsburg, I'm not sure. One of the old Dutch farmhouses here in Brooklyn, there are still 10 of them still standing. It's in Marine Park, the Hendrik Lot Farmhouse on East 36th Street between Fillmore Avenue and Avenue S. The last member of the Sydam family that lived there married into the Lot family. Her name was Ellie Sydam, and she died in 1992, and she was 92 years old. At one time, she was the librarian at Erasmus High School. Okay. Let's see. John Jay, Robert R. Livingston, John H. Livingston, Comfort Sands, downtown there's Sand Street, downtown Brooklyn. Okay? Samuel Franklin, Franklin Street, not Benjamin Franklin. Okay? Richard Platt. What do you know about Platt? Upstate New York. Plattsburgh, New York. Richard Platt. Okay? There's a whole other lecture I do about how the 5 boroughs became New York City. He's a very prominent person in that story. And the last one, Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr shot and killed Alexander Hamilton in a duel. After they gave the money to go to Erasmus. All right? Interesting. These are some of the people that donated money to go to Erasmus. But there was a problem. They didn't have enough money to complete it. So what were they going to do? Well, let's go back to 1636. On June 16th, 1636, 3 land deals were done where the Dutch bought, I'm going to say, they bought land from the Canarsie Indians. One land was called Little Flats. That became the village of New Amersfoort, Flatlands. Today, the center of that village would be Kings Highway and Flatbush Avenue. But the other 2 properties that they bought from the Canarsies were, today it would be like in East Flatbush, okay? And it was called Collier's Flats and Twiller's Flats. Wouter van Twiller was the governor of New Amsterdam in 1636. So he bought land in what's to become Brooklyn. And Collier also bought land in 1636. But now in 1786, when they were building Erasmus, 150 years later, those 2 parcels of land in what's now East Flatbush, nothing had ever been built on it, but was part of the town of Flatbush. And it was owned in common by the people of Flatbush. So they decided to divide Collier's Flats and Twiller's Flats into land lots. And the money earned by selling those lots was more people moving into Flatbush. And now they had more lots for people to buy. That money was used to complete the building of Erasmus. Okay? Now, what did people do? By the way, this is Cortelyou Road and Argyle Road in 1905. That's Public School 139. That was my son's 4th grade classroom up here when we lived around the corner on Rugby Road. Not 1905, the 1980s. Okay? And this little boy, like Cortelyou Road is unpaved, Argyle Road is unpaved. This little boy here is standing with Indian feathers sticking out right over here. And you can see the one with the long Victorian dress on. Okay? This school was opened September 14th, 1903. This picture is 1905. A young man, 7 years old, named Paul Anthony, attended this school the day it opened. Okay? In 1906, in 1903, his father bought property on the corner of Cortelyou Road and East 17th Street for $1,000. And for $6,000, built a house there. That house is still standing. Okay? And then little Paul Anthony attended the school the day it opened in 1903, 7 years old. Many, many years later, he and his wife rented an apartment at 312 Rugby Road. That's the apartment my wife and I lived in from 1978 to 1986. It was built as a one-family, 15-room mansion, but in 1938 it was converted to a two-family house. We rented the downstairs apartment. Okay? 3 bedrooms, this is 1978. 3 bedrooms, living room, full dining room, and eat-in kitchen, the whole backyard to ourselves, and our own washer and dryer in the basement for $350. Okay? That was in 1978. Anyhow, Paul Anthony, when he got married, rented that apartment. 2 years later, he bought a house at 293 Rugby Road, where he and his wife lived until they both passed away within 2 weeks of each other in 1985, at 89 and 91 years old. And I did the newsletter for the Neighborhood Association. Bicycle path. Ocean Parkway had the first dedicated bicycle path in the United States. And during the winter, there were horse-drawn sleigh races on Ocean Parkway before it was paved.
I remember horseback. When I was a kid, I remember used to see horses.
The bridle path on Ocean Parkway was taken off in the 1970s when they resurfaced Ocean Parkway.
So how long was it a horse? Was it a path?
Well, the bicycle path is still there. The horse path was there from the 1870s, 1880s until the 1970s, about 100 years.
Wow, long time.
Yeah. I know, because I grew up a block off of Ocean Parkway.
I remember as a kid, we'd go up Ocean Parkway, we'd go to the beach, and I always saw people on horseback going up Ocean Parkway. It was it was normal.
There were 2 stables. One stable, Fiorello LaGuardia was mayor of New York in the 1930s. He was on the way to a big fire, and his limousine was driving into the fire. And the trolley cars were in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And there was traffic. And they couldn't get through, and he's yelling to the driver, "We gotta get rid of these trolleys!" The Goodyear Rubber Company offered him a deal. Get rid of the trolleys, get buses, and we'll give you a good deal on the tires for the buses.
No.
And that started
That's
the
how it
beginning of the end of the trolley cars.
Because they were fun, those trips.
Sure, they were fun, but you know what? In order to get on the trolley, you had to go out into the street and wait for the trolley. All right? And it became dangerous.
Well, in San Francisco, same thing.
Well, look, New Orleans has trolleys too. It's not Canada, it's a trolley. This is a 1905 scene blown up from an old postcard I have from 1905. The entrance into Prospect Park by Park Circle. And it says South Entrance, Prospect Park, Brooklyn, New York, horse and wagon. Everything in this picture is exactly the same today, except horses still go in here without the wagon. And this lamppost, this old lamppost, is now a new modern one. This structure is still there. I'm sure some of these trees might still be there. And this big stanchion with the horse on it here, that's still there at the entrance into Prospect Park. So even though Brooklyn's changed, a lot of it has remained the same. Okay? And of course, we have Grand Army Plaza. That's the 1930s. The Grand Army Plaza Arch was built in 1892 as a memorial to the Union soldiers that fought during the Civil War. And you can't read it because it's in the shadows here. It says, "To the defenders of the Union, 1861 to 1865, the years of the Civil War." Well, there's the arch, Nostrand Avenue, and where they meet, off the picture here, that's the junction. Glenwood Road, East 29th Street. This was the Vanderveer farm. The Vanderveer family farmed this for almost 200 years. Okay? Purchased by the Germania Real Estate Company. These were German immigrants. They established a real estate company. They would buy up farmland and build housing tracts. New neighborhoods sprung up, okay? Here's the sales office for Vanderveer Park on Flatbush Avenue. Now I'm going to show you a picture taken the same day at the junction. There's the sales office. Flatbush Avenue, there's the trolley. Nostrand Avenue, trolley diagonally across. The word junction is a transportation term which means the crossing of two trolley or train lines intersecting. Okay? There's a private residence over here with a fence. This morning I dropped my son off right there. You go down the stairs, you get the number 5 or the number 2 subway into Manhattan. He takes the 5 to Wall Street. Right there. Okay? There's the sales office. This building still stands today on Glenwood and Flatbush. All right? The sign on the real estate office. Vanderveer Park, lots for sale. $5 and $10 monthly.
Oh, God.
How many lots would you like?
Oh, God.
And this little street that cuts in right over here. In this picture, it's called Germania Place because Germania Real Estate. Today it is Hillel Place. That's, you go 1 block over, and there's the campus of Brooklyn College. Okay. Now, watch carefully. Taken from the same spot. 1895, 1916. 1895, 1916. Okay? Watch. 1916, 1946. From the same spot, right in the middle of the street. Okay? The next picture is off the center of the middle of the street because I didn't mind get run over. I took this next picture about 10 years ago. Okay? 1946 and about 10 years ago. Notice it's a little off center. Otherwise I'd get run over. Okay? Now, we're just about finished. I think 3 or 4 more pictures. Early, there's the trolley.
Oh.
That's the Church Avenue trolley in 1907. Church Avenue and East 37th Street. After a summer thunderstorm, you see the puddle in the street here. Okay? And if you take the Brighton line, today the B and the Q train, that's the Beverly Road station in 1900. Okay? The tracks are on the street. Okay? That's Beverly Road, right? Crossing right there. It was a steam railroad that was established in 1878 called the Brooklyn, Flatbush, and Coney Island Railroad. Okay? And the president of the railroad was a gentleman named Henry Cruz Murphy. He was mayor of the city of Brooklyn from 1842 to 1843. He was a state senator when he lived in Bay Ridge. And there's a street in Bay Ridge called Senator Street. That's named after him. It should be Senator Murphy Street, but it's Senator Street. As Flatbush started to get built up with the Victorian homes, these railroads, which were privately owned, no subways yet, the city said, you got to get these tracks off the street. PS 139 I showed you was built. Children were walking across the tracks to get to the school. The tracks were not electric. Steam railroad. But then they became electric with overhead wires. Okay? So, they were going to build an elevated railroad. But the people, these wealthy people buying these Victorian homes, for $7,000, $8,000, $9,000. Now they're $2 million. Okay? And the only option was to put the tracks 18 feet down uncovered. And the next picture shows you that. This is the Newkirk Avenue station. Here's Newkirk Avenue. Here's the original 1878 tracks at street level, and here are the new tracks being put 18 feet down in 1906. And of course, Victorian Flatbush Avenue trolley in 1950. Erasmus High School will be right here. The Flatbush Dutch Reformed Church there. This is 1950. And also, 1950, the Coney Island Avenue trolley
No.
between Ditmas Avenue and Cortelia Road. And the last two pictures, three pictures, the Victorian houses. This house is gone. It's not there anymore. But the one next to it is still there, and that one is still there on Marlborough Road. This is Albemarle Road, and this is Buckingham Road, which will be equivalent to East 16th Street. Okay? This was the home of Dean Alvord. He's the man who bought the land to develop Prospect Park South, which is all landmarked now. Okay? And he had this built for himself. It burned down in the 1950s. The only thing left are these steps right here. This house around the corner was the first one completed in Prospect Park South, October 28, 1899. And all of this property here is the backyard of that house, an acre of land in Flatbush. Okay? And by the way, one of the owners of this house, later on, before it went down, was the Matz family, M-A-T-Z. I hope you never have to use his product. X-Lax, the chocolate laxative.
Oh my God.
Okay? And around the corner, this is Marlborough Road in Prospect Park South. This house here, completed in 1899, was the home of, some of you will recognize the name, Nellie Bly. You know, that's not her real name. Her name was Elizabeth Cochran. She came from Cochran's Mills, Pennsylvania in the 1890s as a journalist, and she came to New York to make it big as a journalist. And she finally got a job at the New York World, a major publication. And her history is that she would do crazy, outlandish things to get her stories. She once stowed away on a ship to get a story. But the best story of all is she had herself committed to an insane asylum to do a story about the institution. Where was that institution? Today's Roosevelt Island in the East River. It was called, I think, Welfare Island, it was called, okay? And the only one that knew that she was doing this was the editor of the New York World. So she was there about 10 or 12 days, getting all her notes together, finished, packed up her stuff, she started to leave. Where do you think you're going, young lady? Well, I'm really a reporter for the New York World, and I'm doing a story. Sure, sure, sure. And they escorted her back to her room. Well, fortunately, one of the nurses believed her. And she said, please, you got to get in touch with my editor. The editor was got in touch with. Nellie Bly was released. Her story was published. Across the street from her, in this Tudor-style house built in 1901, if you were to stand on the sidewalk and look up at the chimney today, you will still see a big old English style letter S for Stillwell. Charles Stillwell. Stillwell Avenue. It's not named after him. Named after an early family member, I think it's William Stillwell, who actually bought land in the 1800s from John McCain, not the senator from Arizona. He's old, but not that old. John McCain was the commissioner of the town of Gravesend. A sneaky, underhanded, conniving, sneaky guy. He was once jailed for election fraud. Okay? So, Charles Stillwell lived here. You ever watch old movies on AMC? Okay? That once a year they'll show two movies back to back.
I can't wait on you.
First movie, Edison the Boy, about Thomas Edison as a boy. And who plays Thomas Edison the boy? Mickey Rooney. Great movie. Great, great movie when Mickey Rooney was a boy. The next movie right after that is Edison the Man, starring Spencer Tracy as the inventor. And in the movie, Spencer Tracy meets Margaret Stillwell and marries Margaret Stillwell from Brooklyn. Interesting story. And how does Flatbush change ethnically? By 1935, when this picture was taken, at Flatbush Avenue, near Avenue I, this was a coal yard here. And above the coal yard, written in 3 languages, is warning. I'm going to read the English one. It says, Warning, live electric wires over all tracks. Keep off the tops of the cars, the railroad cars. It's in English, Italian, and Hebrew. 1935. And with that, this is how Flatbush started and how it is almost like today. Any questions?